Traitor's Daughter: How an American Army nurse became Vietnam's most deadly female sniper. Welcome back to Hidden Vietnam History, where we uncover the stories that reveal the hidden complexity of war and the extraordinary individuals who defied everything they were supposed to believe. Tonight, we're exploring one of the most controversial and psychologically complex stories from the Vietnam conflict, a tale of betrayal, transformation, and deadly precision that challenges everything you think you know about loyalty and war. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button for more incredible stories of individuals who crossed lines that were never supposed to be crossed. Like this video if you want to discover how one American woman went from saving lives as an army nurse to taking them as the most feared sniper in the North Vietnamese arsenal. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with our global community of truth seekers. Now prepare yourself, because tonight we're meeting Catherine Kate Sullivan, the American defector who became known to her former countrymen as the Traitor's Daughter, and to her adopted Vietnamese comrades as Sister Death, the woman whose journey from battlefield medic to precision killer would force both sides to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of war, loyalty, and moral transformation. Chapter 1: The Nurse Who Saved Enemy Lives. Catherine Sullivan arrived in Vietnam in March 1967 as a 26-year-old Army nurse, assigned to the 12th Evacuation Hospital in Cu Chi. She came from a military family. Her father was a career Marine who had fought in World War II in Korea. Her brother was serving with the 101st Airborne, and her fiancé was a helicopter pilot stationed at Bien Hoa. Kate was everything the Army wanted in a combat nurse: technically skilled, emotionally resilient, and completely committed to the mission of saving American lives. She had volunteered for Vietnam duty specifically to serve alongside the men who were fighting for American interests, and she threw herself into her work with passionate dedication. But Kate's commitment to saving lives went beyond nationalism. From her first day in the combat zone, she made a decision that would eventually transform her entire worldview. She would provide medical care to anyone who needed it, regardless of which side they fought for. This wasn't official policy. American medical facilities were supposed to treat wounded enemy prisoners only after all American and Allied casualties had been cared for. But Kate couldn't reconcile her medical training with the idea that some human lives were worth more than others, based on political affiliation. She began treating wounded Viet Cong and North Vietnamese soldiers with the same level of care and attention she provided to American troops. She learned basic Vietnamese phrases to communicate with patients who couldn't speak English. She studied traditional Vietnamese medical practices to understand how her patients understood pain, healing, and recovery. More importantly, she began talking to the wounded enemy soldiers about their motivations, their backgrounds, and their understanding of the conflict. What she learned challenged everything she had believed about the war, and about the nature of the enemy American forces were fighting. The North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers she treated weren't the fanatical communist ideologues described in military briefing. They were farmers, students, and working people who believed they were defending their homeland from foreign invasion. Their motivations were nationalist rather than ideological, and their commitment was based on love of country rather than abstract political principle. As Kate's understanding of the war evolved, she found herself increasingly troubled by the contradiction between her mission as a healer and her role as part of a military force that was destroying the country she was supposedly helping to save. Chapter 2: The Awakening. Kate's transformation began with a patient she would never forget, a 17-year-old North Vietnamese soldier named Duc, who had been captured with severe shrapnel wounds from an American artillery strike. Duc had been fighting for 3 years, since he was 14, and had joined the army after his village was destroyed in a bombing raid that killed his parents and younger sister. He spoke some English, having attended a French missionary school before the war, and during his recovery he shared his story with Kate. What struck Kate wasn't just Duc's personal tragedy. Every soldier had tragic story. What changed her perspective was Duc's sophisticated understanding of the political and historical forces that had led to the current conflict. This wasn't an ignorant peasant who had been brainwashed by communist propaganda. This was an intelligent, thoughtful young man who had made a reasoned decision to fight against what he saw as American imperialism. Duc explained the Vietnamese perspective on the war, that American involvement was the latest in a series of foreign interventions that had prevented Vietnamese self-determination for centuries. The French had colonized Vietnam,
The Japanese had occupied it, and now the Americans were dividing it to serve their own strategic interest. From the Vietnamese perspective, the Americans weren't liberators fighting communist tyranny. They were the latest in a long line of foreign powers trying to control Vietnam for their own purposes. Kate found herself unable to refute Duc's arguments or to explain why American involvement in Vietnam was morally justified. The more she learned about Vietnamese history and culture, the more she understood that American forces were fighting on the wrong side of a war for national independence. The turning point came when Duc was scheduled to be transferred to a prisoner of war camp. Kate knew that conditions in these camps were harsh, and that many prisoners didn't survive. She also knew that Duc was still recovering from his wounds and wouldn't survive the transfer in his current condition. Against all regulations and military law, Kate helped Duc escape from the hospital. She provided him with medical supplies, civilian clothing, and information about safe routes back to North Vietnamese territory. It was an act of treason that would have resulted in court-martial and imprisonment if discovered, but for Kate it was the only morally defensible action available to her. Chapter 3. The decision to defect. After helping Duc escape, Kate began secretly providing medical supplies and information to North Vietnamese operatives who worked in the hospital as translators and support staff. She justified her actions as medical assistance. She was helping wounded people regardless of their political affiliation. But as Kate's involvement deepened, she realized that she was moving beyond medical neutrality toward active collaboration with the enemy. She was providing intelligence about American military operations, helping other prisoners escape, and using her position to support North Vietnamese activities. The psychological strain of maintaining her double life was enormous. Kate was betraying everything she had been raised to believe while watching American soldiers die from wounds that might have been inflicted by people she was helping. The crisis came in October 1968, when her brother Michael was killed in action during a North Vietnamese ambush near Da Nang. Kate received the news while treating wounded American soldiers who had survived the same operation where Michael had died. The rational response would have been to end her collaboration with the North Vietnamese and return to her role as an American military nurse. Instead, Kate's reaction was to accelerate her involvement with the enemy. She realized that Michael had died fighting an unjust war for objectives that served no legitimate American interest. His death wasn't a heroic sacrifice. It was a waste of life caused by misguided political decisions made by leaders who didn't understand or care about the real consequences of their policies.
Kate decided that the only way to honor Michael's memory was to work toward ending the war as quickly as possible, even if that meant working for an American defeat. In November 1968, Kate made contact with the North Vietnamese intelligence officer and offered to defect. She provided detailed information about American medical procedures, hospital security, and the treatment protocols for wounded prisoners. More importantly, she offered to continue working as a medical professional in North Vietnamese facilities. Chapter 4. The training of a sniper. Kate's defection was initially met with suspicion by North Vietnamese intelligence. American defectors were rare, and there was always the possibility that her offer was part of an elaborate intelligence operation designed to penetrate North Vietnamese organizations. For 3 months, Kate was held in a facility near Hanoi, where she was extensively debriefed and evaluated. Intelligence officers questioned her about every aspect of her background, her motivations, and her knowledge of American military operations. But Kate also underwent ideological education designed to transform her from an American military professional into a committed supporter of Vietnamese independence. She studied Vietnamese history, learned about the struggle against French colonialism, and came to understand the war from a Vietnamese nationalist perspective. Most importantly, Kate was introduced to other American defectors who had made similar journeys, from supporters of American policy to advocates for Vietnamese victory. These individuals helped her understand that her transformation wasn't unique or pathological. It was a rational response to the moral contradictions of American involvement in Vietnam. Kate's medical skills made her valuable as a healthcare provider, and she was initially assigned to work in field hospitals treating North Vietnamese and Viet Cong wounded. But Kate wanted to do more than provide medical care. She wanted to actively contribute to Vietnamese victory by developing skills that would allow her to eliminate American forces. Kate requested training as a sniper. The request was unusual. Female snipers were rare in the North Vietnamese military, and American defectors were typically assigned to intelligence or propaganda roles rather than direct combat position. But Kate's psychological evaluation suggested that she possessed the mental characteristics necessary for precision shooting, exceptional patience, emotional control under stress, and an ability to compartmentalize moral conflict. More importantly, Kate's medical training had given her detailed knowledge of human anatomy that would be invaluable in identifying vital areas for maximum lethality with single shots. Chapter 5. The Science of Killing. Kate's sniper training took place at a facility near the Chinese border, where the North Vietnamese military developed specialized combat technique. Her instructors were veterans who had fought against the French and had adapted traditional hunting skills for military applications. The transition from medical professional to precision killer required a fundamental transformation of Kate's relationship with the human body. As a nurse, she had learned to see bodies as systems that needed to be healed and preserved. As a sniper, she had to learn to see bodies as targets that could be efficiently destroyed. Kate's medical knowledge proved to be both an advantage and a psychological challenge. She understood exactly what would happen when a bullet struck specific areas of the human body. She could predict the immediate and secondary effects of different types of wounds. She knew precisely how to inflict maximum damage with minimum expenditure of ammunition. But this knowledge also meant that Kate understood the suffering she would be causing in ways that other snipers didn't. When she killed someone, she would know exactly how they died, how much pain they experienced, and how long they took to expire. The psychological preparation for this transition involved intensive ideological work designed to help Kate see American soldiers not as individuals, but as representatives of an oppressive system that was destroying Vietnam. Her instructors emphasized that every American she killed would potentially save multiple Vietnamese lives by reducing the military capacity of the occupying forces. Kate's training also emphasized the propaganda value of an American defector killing American soldiers. Each confirmed kill by the American sniper would demonstrate to other American troops that their own countrymen recognized the injustice of the war and were willing to fight against it. The technical training was equally intensive. Kate learned to use a variety of rifles, from Soviet-supplied Mosin Naguns to captured American weapons. She studied ballistics, meteorology, and camouflage techniques. She practiced shooting at different distances and under various environmental conditions. Most importantly, Kate learned to integrate her sniper activities with the broader intelligence and propaganda operations of the North Vietnamese military. Her kills would be carefully planned to maximize their psychological impact on American forces, while gathering intelligence about enemy capabilities and intention. Chapter 6. The First Kill. Kate's first operational assignment came in March 1969 when she was deployed to support North Vietnamese operations against American forces in the A Shao Valley. Her mission was to eliminate high-value targets while gathering intelligence about American tactics and equipment. The target was Captain Robert Hayes, a medical officer who was responsible for coordinating casualty evacuation operations for the 1st Cavalry Division. Hayes had developed innovative techniques for battlefield medicine that were significantly reducing American casualty rates, making him a high-priority target for elimination. Kate studied Hayes for 3 days, observing his routines and identifying optimal shooting position. Her medical background helped her understand Hayes's activities and predict his movements based on the types of medical emergencies he would need to respond to. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was using her knowledge of military medicine to eliminate someone whose work was dedicated to saving the lives of wounded soldiers. The shot came when Hayes was treating wounded soldiers at a forward aid station. Kate's position was 400 meters away, concealed in dense jungle that provided perfect camouflage while offering a clear sight line to the medical facility. Kate's bullet struck Hayes in the center of his chest, killing him instantly. The shot was perfectly placed to cause immediate cardiac arrest, while avoiding areas that might allow for emergency medical intervention. As Hayes collapsed, Kate felt a complex mix of emotions: satisfaction at having eliminated a legitimate military target, grief at having killed someone whose work was similar to what hers had once been, and a disturbing sense of professional pride at having executed a technically perfect shot. The psychological impact on American forces was immediate.
The death of a medical officer during what should have been a safe activity created paranoia and forced changes in medical evacuation procedures that reduced their efficiency. More importantly, the precision of the kills suggested that American forces were facing a sniper with professional-level skills and detailed knowledge of military medicine, exactly the kind of enemy that would be most difficult to counter.
Chapter 7. The legend grows. Over the following 18 months, Kate eliminated 47 American soldiers in carefully planned operations throughout South Vietnam. Her targets were selected for maximum strategic impact: officers whose deaths would disrupt command structures, specialists whose expertise was difficult to replace, and medical personnel whose elimination would reduce the effectiveness of American combat operations. Kate's signature technique became the precision shot that killed instantly while avoiding areas that might allow for medical intervention. Her deep understanding of anatomy allowed her to identify optimal aim points for different target positions and ranges, but Kate also developed psychological warfare techniques that maximized the terror impact of her activities. She would sometimes leave medical supplies near the bodies of her victims, a calling card that identified her as the American sniper, while emphasizing the contradiction between her medical background and her current activities. American intelligence eventually identified Kate as the source of the precision kills that were devastating morale among medical and support personnel. The revelation that an American defector was responsible for the deaths created a scandal that reached the highest levels of military command. The psychological impact was profound. American soldiers began to understand that they weren't just fighting Vietnamese enemies. They were being hunted by one of their own countrymen who possessed inside knowledge of American tactics, equipment, and vulnerabilities. Efforts to eliminate Kate became a high priority for American Special Operations Forces. Multiple units were assigned to track and eliminate the traitor's daughter. But Kate's combination of sniper skills and intelligence about American operations made her almost impossible to locate and engage. Kate also began training other North Vietnamese snipers, sharing her knowledge of American military psychology and tactics. Her understanding of how American soldiers thought and operated allowed her students to predict enemy behavior and position themselves for optimal effectiveness. Chapter 8. The hunter becomes the hunted. The intensity of efforts to eliminate Kate escalated when she killed Major General William Thompson, the deputy commander of medical operations for all American forces in Vietnam. Thompson's death during a supposedly secure briefing revealed that Kate had access to high-level intelligence about American command activities. The assassination was a precision shot from over 600 meters that struck Thompson while he was reviewing casualty reports inside a fortified command bunker. The shot demonstrated technical skills that exceeded those of most military snipers and suggested that Kate had received advanced training from highly qualified instructors. American intelligence concluded that Kate posed a strategic threat that justified extraordinary measures for her elimination. A joint task force was assembled with the specific mission of tracking and killing the American defector, who had become one of the most effective enemy operatives in the theater. The task force included special operations personnel, intelligence specialists, and psychological warfare experts, who developed a comprehensive profile of Kate's motivations, capabilities, and likely operational patterns. They studied her background as a nurse, analyzed her sniper techniques, and attempted to predict her future targets based on the strategic objectives of North Vietnamese forces. The manhunt became a deadly game of chess between Kate and American forces, who were specifically trained and equipped to hunt snipers. Kate's advantage was her knowledge of American tactics and her ability to predict how American forces would respond to her activity. But the Americans had resources that Kate couldn't match: sophisticated surveillance equipment, aerial reconnaissance assets, and the ability to coordinate large-scale operations designed to locate and eliminate individual targets. The psychological pressure on Kate was enormous. She was simultaneously the hunter and the hunted, operating in enemy territory while being pursued by forces that possessed overwhelming technological advantages. Chapter 9. The Moral Reckoning. As Kate's kill count increased,
she began experiencing psychological effects that forced her to confront the moral implications of her transformation from healer to killer. The skills that had made her an effective nurse, empathy, attention to detail, concern for human suffering, were now being used to cause precisely the suffering she had once dedicated her life to preventing. Kate's dreams were haunted by the faces of the men she had killed. Her medical training meant that she understood exactly what each of her victims had experienced in their final moments. She knew how much pain they had felt, how long they had remained conscious, and what their last thoughts might have been. The psychological strain was compounded by the realization that some of her victims might have been soldiers she had once treated as a nurse. American forces rotated personnel frequently, and it was possible that Kate had saved the life of someone she later killed. Kate began experiencing symptoms that would today be recognized as severe post-traumatic stress disorder: insomnia, hypervigilance, emotional numbing, and intrusive memories of her kills. But she also experienced something more complex: moral injury caused by the fundamental contradiction between her identity as a healer and her actions as a killer. The North Vietnamese military provided psychological support designed to help Kate maintain her effectiveness as a sniper. But this support was focused on ideological reinforcement rather than addressing the deeper psychological conflicts she was experiencing. Kate was encouraged to see her kills as medical interventions designed to heal the larger injury that American forces were inflicting on Vietnam. Each American death would potentially prevent multiple Vietnamese deaths by weakening the military capacity of the occupying force. But this rationalization couldn't completely resolve the psychological tension Kate was experiencing. She had crossed moral boundaries that couldn't be uncrossed, and she was living with the consequences of decisions that had fundamentally changed who she was as a human being. Chapter 10. The Final Shot. The end came in August 1971 when Kate was assigned to eliminate Colonel James Morrison, the commanding officer of the task force that had been hunting her for over a year. Morrison had developed innovative counter-sniper techniques that were reducing the effectiveness of North Vietnamese sniper operations throughout the region. The assignment represented the ultimate test of Kate's abilities. She would be targeting someone whose specific mission was to eliminate her, using skills and knowledge that he had developed specifically to counter her tactics. Kate studied Morrison for 2 weeks, learning his routines and identifying patterns in his security arrangements. Her intelligence sources provided detailed information about Morrison's background, his tactical preferences, and the procedures his unit used for protection against sniper attack. The psychological dimension of the confrontation was as important as the tactical aspects. Kate was preparing to kill someone who had dedicated months of his professional life to understanding her psychology, predicting her behavior, and developing methods for her elimination. Morrison, meanwhile, was using every technique available to modern military intelligence to locate and eliminate an enemy who possessed inside knowledge of all the methods he was using against. The confrontation reached its climax when Morrison established a command post in a location that appeared to offer perfect security against sniper attack. The facility was surrounded by open ground that would expose any approaching sniper, and Morrison's security team had positioned observers and electronic detection equipment to identify potential shooting position.
But Kate had identified a shooting position that Morrison's security analysis hadn't considered, a location that required her to fire through a narrow gap between buildings while accounting for wind effects and the movement of the target through a predictable pattern. The shot was technically perfect, a 700-meter precision kill that demonstrated the full extent of Kate's development as a professional sniper. Morrison died instantly, never realizing that his opponent had been observing him from a position that his own security analysis had determined was impossible to use effectively. Chapter 11. The Price of Betrayal. Kate's elimination of Morrison represented the pinnacle of her effectiveness as a sniper, but it also marked the beginning of her psychological collapse. The kill had required her to demonstrate skills that exceeded those of most professional military snipers, and the technical perfection of the shot forced her to confront the full extent of her transformation. Kate realized that she had become something that her former self would have considered monstrous, a person who could kill with clinical precision while feeling professional pride at the technical excellence of her work. The psychological barriers that had once prevented her from harming others had been systematically removed through training and ideological conditioning. Kate had become a machine for converting political objectives into targeted deaths, and she was extraordinarily effective at this function. But effectiveness came at a cost that Kate was only beginning to understand. She had sacrificed her identity as a healer, her connections to her original culture and values, and her ability to form normal human relationships. She existed in a psychological space between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The North Vietnamese military viewed Kate as a valuable asset, whose skills were crucial to their continued operations against American forces, but they also recognized that her psychological condition was becoming unstable in ways that might affect her operational effectiveness. Kate began requesting assignments that would allow her to return to medical work, but her commanders considered her too valuable as a sniper to reassign to healthcare role. Her medical background was seen as an advantage that enhanced her effectiveness as a killer, rather than as a qualification for alternative duties. The isolation was profound. Kate couldn't return to her original identity as an American nurse, but she couldn't fully integrate into North Vietnamese society either. She was valued for her skills rather than accepted as a person, and her psychological needs were subordinated to her military utility. Chapter 12. The Ghost in the Machine. Kate's final operation came in March 1973. During the final phase of American withdrawal from Vietnam. Her mission was to eliminate a team of American advisors who were training South Vietnamese forces in counter-sniper techniques that might be used against North Vietnamese snipers after American forces departed. But instead of completing the mission, Kate did something that surprised everyone involved. She contacted the American advisors and offered to defect back to American forces. Kate's attempt to return to the American side was motivated by psychological breakdown, rather than renewed patriotism. She had reached a point where she could no longer function as a sniper, and she desperately wanted to return to medical work as a way of recovering some connection to her original identity. The American response was swift and brutal. Kate was considered a traitor whose defection had resulted in American deaths, and there was no mechanism for accepting her return or forgiving her actions. Instead of accepting her surrender, American forces attempted to eliminate Kate as an enemy operative. A special operations team was dispatched with orders to kill the traitor's daughter, rather than capture her for intelligence purposes. Kate found herself in an impossible position, rejected by the North Vietnamese forces who no longer trusted her loyalty, and hunted by American forces who considered her a traitor, deserving of death. Her final engagement came when she was cornered by the American elimination team near the DMZ. Kate fought with all the skills she had developed as a sniper, but she was outnumbered and outgunned by forces that were specifically trained and equipped for eliminating targets like her. Kate's last shot killed the American team leader, a young officer who reminded her of her dead brother Michael, as she died from wounds inflicted by the Special Operations Team. Kate's final thoughts were about the medical care she might have provided to the man she had just killed. Epilogue. The legacy of betrayal. Catherine Sullivan's story remained classified for decades after her death. The existence of an American defector who had become an effective enemy sniper raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of loyalty, the morality of American involvement in Vietnam, and the psychological effects of war on individuals who were forced to confront moral contradiction. Kate's case challenged fundamental assumptions about patriotism and moral certainty. Her transformation from dedicated American nurse to deadly enemy operative demonstrated that political and moral conversion was possible under circumstances that forced individuals to confront the consequences of their belief. The military's response to Kate's defection included changes in psychological screening procedures designed to identify personnel who might be susceptible to ideological conversion. Medical personnel received additional training in maintaining professional ethics under combat conditions. But Kate's story also revealed the limitations of institutional responses to individual moral crises. No amount of screening or training could completely prevent situations where dedicated professionals might conclude that their institutional loyalties conflicted with their deeper moral commitment. Kate's legend persisted in both American and Vietnamese military culture, but with completely different interpretations. American forces remembered her as a cautionary tale about the dangers of moral relativism and the importance of maintaining clear distinctions between friend and enemy. Vietnamese forces celebrated her as an example of moral courage,
and the possibility that even Americans could recognize the justice of Vietnamese resistance to foreign domination. The truth, as is often the case in war, was more complex than either legend suggests. Kate Sullivan was neither a heroic freedom fighter nor a simple traitor. She was a person who made moral choices under impossible circumstances and paid a profound psychological price for following her convictions to their logical conclusion. Her story demonstrates that in war, the boundaries between right and wrong, friend and enemy, healer and killer, are far less clear than military institutions require them to. Kate's transformation from nurse to sniper, from patriot to defector, from healer to killer, revealed the moral complexity that lies beneath the surface of every conflict. In the end, Kate Sullivan became exactly what she had started out trying to prevent: another casualty of a war that destroyed everyone it touched, regardless of which side they fought. Her rifle fell silent in 1973, but the questions raised by her choices continue to echo in discussions about war, morality, and the price of conviction. Perhaps that's the most fitting memorial for someone who spent her final years trying to reconcile the irreconcilable, the memory of moral questions that have no easy answer.